Emma Blackstone stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan penthouse office, watching the city buzz with life 40 floors below. At 32, she had built Technova Industries into a billion-dollar empire, revolutionizing how businesses manage their digital infrastructure. Yet, despite her incredible success, one problem continued to plague her ambitious expansion plans. "The Korean delegation walked out again," announced her assistant, James, as he entered with a steaming cup of coffee. "Third international deal. This month that fell through because they wanted to negotiate with the head of household instead of you directly." Emma's jaw tightened. Despite living in the 21st century, many traditional business cultures still preferred dealing with married men rather than single women, regardless of their qualifications. Her father, Richard Blackstone, had built the company's foundation, but Emma's innovations had transformed it into the global powerhouse it was today. Still, some clients seemed to care more about her marital status than her business acumen. "Get me a meeting with the board," Emma said, turning from the window. "I have an idea that might solve this problem once and for all." Meanwhile, across the city in a modest office building, Oliver Hayes was experiencing his own crisis. The 35-year-old investment banker sat surrounded by boxes, packing up the remnants of Hayes Financial Solutions. What had started as his dream company 5 years ago was now crumbling due to a series of bad investments and a major client's unexpected bankruptcy. "The bank wants everything liquidated by month's end," said Catherine Montenegro, his business partner and closest friend for over a decade. "I'm sorry, Oliver. I know how much this place meant to you." Oliver ran his hands through his dark hair, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on him. He had always been the reliable one, the man everyone turned to for financial advice. Now he couldn't even save his own company. The worst part wasn't losing the business. It was letting down the small orphanage in Queens that depended on his monthly donations. Those children had become his family, and now he would have to disappoint them too. "Maybe it's time to accept that corporate buyout offer from Meridian Group," Catherine suggested gently. "It's not ideal, but at least you'd have a steady income again." "Working for the company that helped destroy my clients?" Oliver shook his head. "I'd rather drive a taxi." An unexpected solution. 3 days later, Oliver received a call that would change his life forever. James, Emma's assistant, had done extensive research on reputable businessmen facing temporary financial difficulties. Oliver's spotless reputation, despite his current troubles, made him the perfect candidate for Emma's unconventional solution. "Miss Blackstone would like to meet with you regarding a unique business proposition," James explained over the phone. "Are you available this afternoon?" Curious and frankly desperate, Oliver agreed to the meeting. He arrived at Technova Industries' gleaming headquarters wearing his best suit, though he couldn't help feeling out of place among the obvious wealth and success surrounding him. Emma received him in her private conference room, a space that managed to be both impressive and welcoming. She was smaller than he had expected from her commanding media presence, but her green eyes held an intensity that immediately commanded respect. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for coming on such short notice," Emma began, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I have a proposition that might benefit both of us, though I warn you it's quite unusual." Oliver listened carefully as Emma explained her problem with international clients and traditional business cultures. She spoke with the precision of someone accustomed to making million-dollar decisions, but he detected something else beneath her professional demeanor, a frustration that he recognized from his own struggles with expectations and limitations. "I need a husband," Emma said finally, her directness catching him off guard. "Not for romance or companionship, but as a business partner. Someone respectable who can accompany me to international meetings and satisfy the traditional expectations of our more conservative clients." Oliver blinked, certain he had misunderstood. "You're proposing marriage?" "A marriage contract," Emma clarified, sliding a folder across the table. 3 years with clearly defined terms and expectations. You would receive a substantial payment up front, enough to restart your financial consulting business on a much larger scale. In return, you'd attend important business functions, international trips, and help me navigate situations where having a husband provides a strategic advantage. The terms of business as Oliver opened the folder. His eyes widened at the figures Emma was proposing. The upfront payment alone would solve all his immediate problems and provide enough capital to not only restart his business but expand it beyond his original dreams. More importantly, it would allow him to continue supporting the orphanage and maybe even increase his contributions. "Why me?" Oliver asked, still processing the magnitude of her offer. "Surely you know plenty of wealthy men who would jump at this opportunity." Emma smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Precisely because you're not wealthy right now, and you're not jumping at the opportunity. I need someone who understands that this is a business arrangement, not a romantic fairy tale. Your reputation for integrity and discretion is exactly what I need." She explained that they would maintain separate living spaces within a shared penthouse, appear together at necessary functions, but otherwise live independent lives. There would be no expectations of romance or physical intimacy. This was purely a professional partnership designed to solve both their problems. "I understand this is a lot to consider," Emma continued. "You don't have to decide today, but I do need an answer within the week. I have a crucial meeting with Japanese investors next month, and I'd prefer to attend as a married woman." Oliver studied the contract, noting how thoroughly Emma had thought through every detail. Separate bank accounts, clearly defined public appearances, even a clause about how to handle the eventual divorce after 3 years. It was the most businesslike approach to marriage he had ever encountered. "Can I ask you something personal?" Oliver said, looking up from the documents. Emma nodded. "Don't you want to find real love someday? Get married for the right reasons?" For a moment, Emma's professional mask slipped, and Oliver glimpsed something vulnerable underneath. "I've been too busy building an empire to worry about romance, Mr. Hayes. This arrangement gives me what I need professionally while allowing both of us to maintain our independence personally." A deal is struck. That evening, Oliver sat in his empty apartment, staring at Emma's contract. Catherine had stopped by earlier, and her reaction had been immediate and vocal. "It's insane, Oliver. You can't marry someone just for money, even if it is a business arrangement. What about finding someone you actually love?" "When exactly am I supposed to have time for dating?" Oliver had replied. "I'm about to lose everything I've worked for. This could give me a fresh start and let me keep helping the kids at the orphanage." Now, alone with his thoughts, Oliver considered his options. Pride told him to refuse, to find another way to rebuild his life. Practicality reminded him that opportunities like this didn't come along often. But it was thinking about the children at St. Mary's Orphanage that finally made up his mind. The next morning, Oliver called Emma's office and accepted her proposal. The wedding planning was as businesslike as the marriage contract itself. They chose a small, elegant ceremony at a historic venue in the city, with only immediate family and a few close friends in attendance. Emma's father, Richard, seemed pleased that his daughter was finally settling down, though Oliver sensed the older man found him somewhat lacking compared to Emma's previous boyfriends from prominent families. Emma's sister, Sophia, was harder to read. The 28-year-old shared Emma's striking features but possessed a calculating coldness that made Oliver uncomfortable. She was polite enough, but he noticed how she watched him during the ceremony, as if trying to figure out what angle he was working. "Welcome to the family," Sophia said during the reception, raising her champagne glass in a toast that somehow felt more like a challenge than a celebration. The foundation of their arrangement in the weeks following their wedding, Emma and Oliver settled into their new routine. The penthouse Emma had purchased for their arrangement was spectacular, with separate wings that allowed them to maintain their privacy while sharing common areas for the times they needed to present themselves as a married couple. Their first test came sooner than expected. The Japanese investors Emma had mentioned moved up their timeline, and suddenly she and Oliver found themselves preparing for a 2-week trip to Tokyo, followed by a honeymoon in Switzerland that would provide excellent photo opportunities for social media and business publications. Remember, we're newlyweds who are deeply in love, Emma instructed during one of their preparation sessions. Hold my hand during meetings. Call me darling occasionally. And for heaven's sake, try to look happy when photographers are around. Oliver found their practice sessions oddly charming. Emma was so focused on making their fake relationship convincing that she had choreographed everything from how they would walk together to what topics they should discuss in public. Her attention to detail was impressive, even if the subject matter was their pretend marriage. "You're very good at this," Oliver observed after they had successfully navigated a mock business dinner. "Have you considered a career in theater?" Emma laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her entire face. "My father always said I was too dramatic for business. Little did he know it would become one of my greatest assets." As they prepared for their first major test as a married couple, neither Emma nor Oliver suspected that their carefully planned arrangement was about to become far more complicated than either of them had anticipated. The honeymoon that was supposed to be nothing more than a business necessity would reveal truths about both of them that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, partnership, and what it meant to truly know another person. Their flight to Japan was scheduled for the following Monday, and with it, the real test of whether two strangers could convince the world they were happily married while protecting their own hearts in the process. The gleaming towers of Tokyo stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of their luxury hotel suite. Emma adjusted her pearl necklace one final time before the mirror, preparing for their third business dinner in as many days. The Japanese investors had been impressed with their presentation, and more importantly, they seemed to genuinely believe that Emma and Oliver were a devoted married couple. "You look beautiful," Oliver said, approaching from behind to place his hands gently on her shoulders. The gesture was purely for practice, since they never knew when hotel staff might be watching, but Emma found herself noticing the warmth of his touch. "Thank you," she replied, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "You clean up rather well yourself." Their performance had been flawless so far. Oliver had mastered the art of the subtle romantic gesture, pulling out chairs, placing his hand on the small of her back as they walked, listening attentively when she spoke in meetings. To outside observers, he appeared to be a successful businessman who was completely smitten with his brilliant wife. During the business meetings, Emma had been impressed by Oliver's natural instincts. He asked intelligent questions, provided valuable insights about market trends, and somehow managed to make her look even more competent rather than overshadowing her accomplishments. It was a delicate balance that many men failed to achieve, but Oliver seemed to understand intuitively how to be supportive without being condescending. "The Yamamoto group wants to take us to dinner tomorrow night," Emma said, reviewing her notes from their latest meeting. "Apparently, it's some sort of traditional celebration for sealing new partnerships." "Should I be worried?" Oliver asked, loosening his tie as he settled into one of the suite's comfortable armchairs. "Only if you're afraid of very expensive sake and having your business ethics questioned in the most polite way possible," Emma replied with a smile. "They're thorough but fair. I think they genuinely like what we're proposing, unexpected conversations that—" Evening after another successful dinner with potential investors, Emma and Oliver found themselves alone on the hotel's rooftop bar. The Tokyo skyline sparkled beneath them like a circuit board, all neon and possibility. They had maintained their newlywed act throughout the evening, but now, in the relative privacy of the nearly empty bar, they could finally relax. "I have to admit you're much better at this than I expected," Emma said, sipping her wine. "Most men I know would either try to take over every conversation or sulk about playing a supporting role." Oliver considered this, turning his whiskey glass slowly in his hands. "Maybe it's because I don't see it as playing a supporting role. What you've built is genuinely impressive, Emma. I'm learning more about international business in these 3 days than I did in the last 3 years. There was something in his tone that made Emma look at him more carefully. In the soft lighting of the rooftop bar, she noticed details she had missed before. The way his eyes crinkled slightly when he was thinking seriously. The small scar above. His left eyebrow that suggested an interesting story. The fact that despite his current financial troubles, he carried himself with quiet confidence rather than desperation. "Can I ask you something personal?" Emma said, surprising herself with the question. "Shoot. Why didn't you try to negotiate for more money? The amount I offered would solve your immediate problems, but you could have asked for much more. Most people would have." Oliver was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights flicker below them. "Because what you offered was fair, and more than fair. I may be broke, but I'm not greedy. Besides," he looked at her directly, "I got the impression that respect mattered more to you than money, and respect isn't something you can buy." Emma felt something shift inside her chest, an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. In her world of corporate negotiations and power plays, she had grown accustomed to people who always wanted more money, more recognition, more of whatever she could provide. Oliver's straightforward honesty was refreshing in a way that caught her off guard. "Your turn," Oliver said. "Personal question." "Fair enough. Why haven't you ever married for real? I've read about you in business magazines for years, and you've never been seriously linked with anyone long-term." Revealing hidden truths, Emma's first instinct was to deflect with a joke or change the subject, but something about the quiet intimacy of the moment made her want to be honest. "I was engaged once, when I was 26, to someone my father handpicked from another prominent business family. The whole thing was very proper and strategic." "What happened?" "I discovered he was more interested in merging with Technova than marrying me. He actually told me he expected I would step back from the business after we had children, let him handle the real responsibilities." Emma's laugh was bitter. "I realized I would rather be alone than with someone who saw me as an asset to be managed rather than a partner to be respected." Oliver nodded slowly. "That explains a lot about this arrangement. You get the benefits of marriage without risking your independence." "Exactly. Though I have to say, you're not quite what I expected when I came up with this plan. Better or worse?" Emma considered the question seriously. "Different. I expected someone who would just cash the check and play their part. You actually seem to care about doing this well." "Maybe because I'm starting to care about you," Oliver said quietly, then immediately looked startled by his own admission. "I mean as a friend, as a business partner." But Emma had caught the slip, and more importantly, she had felt her own heart skip in response. This was dangerous territory, exactly what their contract had been designed to avoid. The orphanage. Secret. The next morning brought their final business meeting in Tokyo, followed by preparations for their flight to Switzerland. Emma was reviewing contracts in the hotel's business center when she noticed Oliver at a computer nearby, speaking quietly into his phone in what sounded like a very personal conversation. "I know, sweetheart, but I promise I'll visit as soon as I get back to New York," he was saying. "Yes, I remember about your piano recital. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Emma tried not to eavesdrop, but curiosity got the better of her. When Oliver finished his call, she couldn't help asking, "Everything all right at home?" Oliver hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Actually, there's something I haven't told you about myself. Something important." He explained about St. Mary's Orphanage, how he had started volunteering there during college and never stopped. How his monthly donations had helped fund music lessons, educational programs, and small luxuries that made the children's lives brighter. How some of the kids had become like family to him over the years. Maria, the girl I was just talking to, she's 12 and incredibly talented at piano. She's been preparing for this recital for months. Oliver's expression softened as he talked about the children. They don't know about my financial troubles. I couldn't bear to disappoint them by cutting off support. Emma stared at him, processing this revelation. That's why you accepted my proposal, not just to restart your business, but to keep helping them. Partially, yes. These kids have had enough disappointment in their lives. If I could prevent adding to that burden, I had to try. For Emma, who had grown up surrounded by privilege and opportunity, the idea of someone sacrificing their pride to protect vulnerable children was both humbling and deeply attractive. She had always respected Oliver's integrity, but this revelation showed her a depth of character she hadn't expected. Swiss revelations. Their flight to Geneva was quiet, both lost in thought about their conversation in Tokyo. The Swiss Alps appeared outside their airplane windows like something from a fairy tale, all snow-capped peaks and pristine valleys. Their honeymoon destination was a luxury resort in Gstaad, chosen specifically for its romantic reputation and the excellent photo opportunities it would provide for their social media presence. The resort was everything Emma had hoped for in terms of appearance. Their suite featured a stone fireplace, a private balcony with mountain views, and enough space for them to maintain their separate sleeping arrangements while looking appropriately couple-like for any staff who might enter. But as they settled into their routine of staged romance, Emma found herself paying attention to details that had nothing to do with their business arrangement. The way Oliver insisted on carrying her luggage, not for show, but out of genuine courtesy. How he remembered that she preferred her coffee with just a touch of cream, even though she had only mentioned it once. The fact that he had somehow managed to book a dinner reservation at a restaurant she had mentioned wanting to try, even though it hadn't been part of their original itinerary. "You didn't have to do that," Emma said when she discovered the reservation confirmation. "I know," Oliver replied simply. "I wanted to." A moment of truth. Their third evening in Switzerland, they found themselves walking through the resort's snow-covered gardens after dinner. The night was clear and cold, with stars visible despite the resort's subtle lighting. Emma had bundled herself in a thick coat and scarf, but she was still shivering slightly in the mountain air. Without thinking, Oliver moved closer and put his arm around her shoulders, sharing his warmth. It was such a natural, protective gesture that Emma forgot for a moment that their relationship was supposed to be purely professional. "Better?" he asked softly. "Much." Emma realized she had unconsciously leaned into his warmth, and for once she didn't pull away or remind herself about maintaining appropriate boundaries. They walked in comfortable silence for several minutes before Emma spoke again. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone else?" Oliver nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. "Sometimes I wonder if building this empire was worth it. If I traded away too much of a normal life for success." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "I have everything I thought I wanted, but I eat most of my meals alone. I attend social events where everyone wants something from me. I haven't had a real conversation with my family in months because every interaction becomes about business strategy." Oliver stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Emma, you've built something incredible. You've created jobs, revolutionized an industry, and shown countless women that they can succeed in business on their own terms. That's not something to regret. But what if I've forgotten how to be a real person in the process? What if I've become so focused on protecting myself that I've missed out on actually living?" The vulnerability in her voice broke something open in Oliver's chest. Without thinking, he reached up to touch her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You haven't forgotten," he said quietly. "The woman who worries about being real, who questions whether success is worth the sacrifice. That's the most real person I've met in years." They stood there in the snow-covered garden, closer than their contract called for, looking into each other's eyes with an intensity that had nothing to do with business arrangements or strategic partnerships. Emma felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by something deeper than attraction, a recognition of kindred spirit, someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the loneliness that could come with success. The kiss that changed everything. What happened next surprised them both. Oliver leaned down and Emma rose up on her toes, and suddenly they were kissing in the Swiss snow like the honeymooners they were pretending to be. But there was nothing fake about the warmth that spread through Emma's entire body, nothing strategic about the way Oliver's arms tightened around her as if he never wanted to let her go. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their breath visible in the cold air between them. "That wasn't in the contract," Emma whispered, though she made no move to step away from his embrace. "No," Oliver agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "It definitely wasn't." They stood there for another long moment, both trying to process what had just happened and what it meant for their carefully planned arrangement. The business deal that had brought them together was becoming something neither of them had expected, something real, complicated, and potentially wonderful. "We should probably go inside," Emma said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. "Probably," Oliver agreed, but neither of them moved. As they finally made their way back to their suite, hand in hand this time without any pretense or audience to perform for, both Emma and Oliver realized that their honeymoon had revealed something neither of them had planned on discovering. They were falling in love with each other, and that changed everything about their carefully negotiated arrangement. The question now was what they would do about it when they returned to the real world, where business contracts and family expectations waited to complicate their newly discovered feelings. The return to reality. The private jet touched down at JFK Airport on a gray Tuesday morning, marking the end of Emma and Oliver's honeymoon and the beginning of a new chapter. Neither of them had planned for. During the flight back from Switzerland, they had sat closer than necessary, their hands intertwined, both lost in thoughts about what their kiss in the snow meant for their business arrangement. "We need to talk about what happened," Emma said, quietly, as their car pulled away from the airport. The driver couldn't hear them through the partition, but she kept her voice low anyway. Oliver nodded, studying her profile as she gazed out the window at the familiar New York skyline. "I know, but first I think we should focus on getting back into our routine. Figure out how to handle the feelings without disrupting what we've built." Emma appreciated his practical approach, even as part of her wanted to throw caution aside and explore these new emotions immediately. The businesswoman in her knew he was right. They had commitments, expectations, and a carefully constructed public image to maintain. Their first test came sooner than expected. As their car pulled up to the penthouse, they were greeted by a small crowd of photographers and reporters who had apparently been tipped off about their return. "Smile and wave," Emma murmured, transforming instantly into the radiant newlywed bride. "Remember, we're blissfully happy." But as Oliver helped her out of the car and pulled her close for the cameras, Emma realized she wasn't acting anymore. The smile on her face was genuine, sparked by his protective presence and the memory of their stolen moments in Switzerland. Unwelcome complications. Inside the penthouse, they found Emma's sister Sophia waiting in the living room, perfectly composed, and holding a glass of wine despite the early hour. "Welcome home, lovebirds," Sophia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you don't mind that I let myself in. Father gave me a key for emergencies." "What kind of emergency?" Emma asked, immediately on guard. She had learned long ago to be wary when Sophia appeared unexpectedly. "Nothing dramatic, just some interesting information about your new husband that I thought you should know." Sophia's tone was casual, but Emma caught the underlying threat. Oliver stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between the sisters. "If you have something to say, Sophia, please just say it directly." Sophia laughed, a crystalline sound that somehow managed to be both beautiful and cold. "I like him, Emma. He's direct, very different from your usual type. She set down her wine glass and pulled out a tablet. I've been doing some research on Hayes Financial Solutions. Very thorough research. Emma felt her stomach tighten as Sophia swiped through what appeared to be financial documents and photographs. Did you know, Emma, that your husband's company didn't just fail due to bad investments? There were some very interesting transactions in the months before the collapse. Payments to offshore accounts, unusual cash withdrawals, suspicious timing on several major trades. That's not what happened, Oliver said firmly, but Emma noticed a muscle in his jaw ticking with tension. Of course not, Sophia continued smoothly. I'm sure there are perfectly innocent explanations. But you know how these things look to outsiders. A failing businessman suddenly marries a billionaire heiress. One might wonder about his true motivations. Defending what matters, Emma felt anger rising in her chest, hot and protective. She had spent enough time with Oliver to know the man he truly was, someone who sacrificed his own pride to help orphaned children, who treated her as an equal partner, who had been nothing but honest about their arrangement from the beginning. Sophia, what exactly are you trying to accomplish here? Emma asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm looking out for your interests, sister dear, and the family's interests. Father is thrilled that you've finally settled down, but if it came out that your husband married you under false pretenses... Sophia shrugged elegantly. Well, it would be embarrassing for everyone. Oliver stepped forward, his own anger now clearly visible. Are you threatening us? I'm offering a solution, Sophia replied. A quiet annulment, generous compensation for Oliver's time and discretion, and we all move on with our lives. Emma can find a more suitable partner, and Oliver can restart his business somewhere far from New York. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Emma stared at her sister, finally seeing clearly what she had always suspected. Sophia's sweetness hid a calculating ambition that would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. No, Emma said simply. Emma, be reasonable. No. Emma's voice was stronger now, filled with conviction. I don't care what lies you've fabricated or what threats you're planning to make. Oliver is my husband, and he's staying my husband. Sophia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise. You can't be serious. This was supposed to be a business arrangement. You told me yourself there were no romantic feelings involved. Emma moved to stand beside Oliver, taking his hand in hers. Plans change, people change, and sometimes the best business decision turns out to be the best personal decision too. The truth about motivation. After Sophia left with barely concealed fury, Emma and Oliver sat in the penthouse's living room, both processing what had just happened. The confrontation had forced Emma to articulate feelings she was still figuring out, but now that the words were spoken, she realized how true they were. Thank you, Oliver said quietly, for defending me, for believing in me. Thank you for not running when my family showed their true colors, Emma replied. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted out of this arrangement after what Sophia just pulled. Oliver turned to face her fully. Emma, there's something I need to tell you about those financial records Sophia mentioned. Emma felt her heart sink, but she forced herself to listen. She wasn't entirely wrong. There were unusual transactions in my company's final months, but they weren't what she implied. Oliver ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Emma had learned meant he was struggling with something difficult. When I realized the business was failing, I liquidated my personal assets and funneled every penny I could into keeping my employees paid and maintaining the orphanage donations. I took out loans against everything I owned to avoid letting anyone down. Emma stared at him. You bankrupted yourself to protect other people? I couldn't face those kids and tell them I was cutting their programs because I'd made bad business decisions, and my employees had families to support. I kept thinking I could turn things around if I just had a little more time. The full picture of Oliver's character crystallized for Emma in that moment. He hadn't failed due to greed or incompetence. He had sacrificed everything rather than let down the people who depended on him. "You magnificent idiot," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face. "You could have explained all of this from the beginning. Would it have changed anything? You needed someone respectable for your business deals. A man who had bankrupted himself for sentimental reasons doesn't exactly scream reliable business partner. A new kind of partnership." Emma kissed him then, right there in their living room with no audience to perform for and no business strategy to consider. It was a kiss that said everything she couldn't yet put into words, that she respected his integrity, that she understood his sacrifices, that she was falling in love with exactly the man he was. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "So, what happens now?" Oliver asked. "This changes our entire arrangement." Emma smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "It changes everything and nothing. We still have a business partnership. It's just becoming a real partnership, too." "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to the original contract. This becomes real, with all the complications that real relationships bring." Emma considered this seriously. She had spent her entire adult life avoiding exactly these complications, protecting herself from vulnerability and the potential for heartbreak. But looking at Oliver, remembering how he had made her laugh in Tokyo and held her in the Swiss snow, she realized that some risks were worth taking. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "I don't know how to do this, the real relationship part. I'm used to contracts and defined terms and clear expectations." Oliver smiled, pulling her closer. "Then we'll figure it out together. Set new terms, create new expectations." Facing the family. Their first major test came 2 weeks later at Richard Blackstone's monthly family dinner. Emma had been dreading the evening, knowing that Sophia would have spent the intervening time working to undermine Oliver in their father's eyes. They arrived at the Blackstone family estate in the Hamptons to find Richard waiting in his study, a room designed to intimidate with its dark wood paneling and walls lined with awards and photos of Richard with various political and business leaders. "Oliver, good to see you again," Richard said, though his tone was notably cooler than during their previous meetings. "I trust the honeymoon was everything you hoped for?" "It was perfect, sir. Your daughter is a remarkable woman." "Yes, she is. Which is why I'm somewhat concerned about some information that has come to my attention regarding your business practices." Emma stepped forward before Oliver could respond. "Father, if Sophia has been spreading gossip about Oliver's company, you should know that she's twisting the facts to serve her own agenda." Richard's eyebrows rose. "Are you defending your husband, or are you admitting there are facts that need defending?" "I'm saying that Oliver's financial difficulties stemmed from his refusal to let down his employees and the charitable causes he supports. If that's the kind of character flaw you're concerned about, then I'm proud to be married to someone with such flaws." The conversation that followed was tense, but ultimately revealing. Richard had built his business empire through calculated decisions and strategic ruthlessness. The idea that Oliver had chosen financial ruin over abandoning his responsibilities was initially incomprehensible to him. But as Emma and Oliver explained the full story, the orphanage, the employee loyalty, the deliberate choice to sacrifice personal gain for others' welfare, Richard's expression slowly shifted from suspicion to grudging respect. The real wedding 6 months after their business arrangement began, Emma and Oliver decided to have a real wedding ceremony, not for business purposes or social expectations, but because they wanted to make genuine vows to each other in front of the people who mattered most to them. The ceremony took place at St. Mary's Orphanage, in the small chapel that Oliver had helped fund. Instead of business associates and society figures, their guests were the children Oliver had mentored, Emma's closest friends from college, and the few family members who truly supported their happiness. Emma's dress was simpler than her first wedding gown, but infinitely more meaningful. Oliver's vows brought tears to her eyes as he promised not just to love and honor her, but to be her true partner in building something bigger than either of them could create alone. I promise to challenge you when you need challenging, support you when you need support, and remind you every day that you are worthy of love, not because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you are, Oliver said, his voice steady. Despite his obvious emotion, Emma's vows were equally heartfelt. I promise to trust you with my dreams and my fears, to build with you instead of just beside you, and to never again mistake business success for personal fulfillment. Building something new. Year after their arrangement began, Emma and Oliver had transformed both their personal relationship and their business partnership into something neither had originally envisioned. Oliver's financial consulting firm, rebuilt with Emma's support and his own hard-earned wisdom, specialized in helping businesses balance profit with social responsibility. Emma had found ways to incorporate Oliver's values into Technova's operations, launching initiatives that provided technology education to underserved communities and created job training programs for young adults aging out of foster care. Their marriage had become exactly what Emma had originally sought in a business arrangement. A true partnership where both parties brought their strengths and supported each other's growth. But it had also become what she had never dared to hope for, a source of joy, comfort, and genuine love. "Do you ever regret it?" Oliver asked one evening as they sat on their penthouse balcony watching the sun set over Manhattan. "Taking such a crazy risk on a stranger?" Emma considered the question seriously, as she always did. "I regret that. It took me so long to realize that the best business decision I ever made was falling in love with you." Oliver smiled, pulling her closer. "Even with all the family drama and complications, especially because of the complications. They taught me that some things are worth fighting for." As the city lights began to twinkle below them, Emma reflected on how far they had both come from that first meeting in her conference room. They had started as strangers looking for a mutually beneficial arrangement, but they had built something far more valuable, a partnership based on respect, trust, and genuine love. Their marriage of convenience had taught them both that sometimes the most practical decision is to follow your heart, and that the best business partnerships are built on the same foundation as the best marriages: honesty, respect, and the willingness to grow together rather than apart. In the end, their fake honeymoon had revealed the most important truth of all: that love, when it's real, doesn't complicate life. It makes everything else make sense. The end.